Hi, good evening. Welcome to the inaugural edition of Zero Hour Online. For those of you wondering what this show is all about, or for those of you wondering what this name for the show is all about, let me explain. Many years ago, the former Speaker of the Lok Sabha, Ravi Ray, introduced a concept in Parliament called the Zero Hour. It's a time after 12 noon, once the question hour ends, when parliamentarians could come together to ask questions that were not listed to be asked otherwise on certain important matters. That name has remained largely with the Indian Parliament. We borrow from there to create our own zero hour, a time to ask questions and find answers around things that we can do to have a better tomorrow. This show is aimed to take place live at 6 p.m. every Monday. The themes, the people will keep changing. The bottom line will remain the same, conversations for a better tomorrow. I'll be the default host. At times the host could change, but we'll have two guests every week. And we'll make sure there's gender diversity, and you'll have guests and hosts where there is at least one man or one woman to a large extent. And that's our promise. Today we have two very special guests. Special because both of them belong to professions that have been in the front line in the last 2.5, 3 months. One is a police officer, and one is the leader of a very interesting healthcare company. Antra Bhargava is the CEO of Suvitas Healthcare. She is based in Bangalore. And Rema Rajeshwari of the Indian Police Services is the Superintendent of Police at Mehbubnagar district in Telangana. They are special because they have been managing families at home and going to work day in and day out. Today is Eid, and Rema was busy with the Eid bandobast for her citizens in the district that she manages the police force for. Thank you, Rema, and thank you, Antra, for joining us for this 1 hour conversation. I'm sure there's lots for us to learn from each other in the course of the next 60 minutes. We have people signing up from various parts of India and outside as well. I know there are a few who've signed up from the United Arab Emirates. There are a few who've signed up from other parts of the country, from Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, Mangalore, and elsewhere. Thank you so much for making the time to come and be part of this new unwebinar that we created. And that's because there have been so many webinars in the last many weeks, and people are feeling a fatigue. We said we'll change that to make people feel a little relaxed with a conversation that goes beyond technicals, to learn about people's lives and find answers that each one of us can either subscribe to or relate to. So thank you all for joining in, and let's begin by asking the lovely ladies their first questions of this evening. So thank you both, Antra and Rema. It's a pleasure to have you this evening.
It's an absolute honor to be on the same forum as Rama. I've heard a lot about her from various sources. We have a facility in Hyderabad as well, and we've worked very closely with the police there, especially when it comes to road traffic accidents and spreading awareness on helmet safety and seatbelt safety. Because a lot of the cases we see in physical rehab are a result of people not wearing their helmets and seatbelts. So we've done a lot of very innovative things, some very silly things like standing in front of KBR Park with signs and wearing yellow T-shirts. But we've done whatever we could in the circumstances. So it's an absolute honor, Rama.
Hi, Antra. It's really a pleasure to join you all. And I see a lot of familiar names. That's really surprising.
Do
And
you? Who are the names you see are familiar? Call them out.
Anubhuti is familiar, and I think I gotta get back to the chart window to look for the name.
Right. You know, there's this senior citizen couple called Derek and Patsy Lobo, Dr. Derek Lobo and Patsy. They were at Hyderabad at Praxis, and they have come onto the call like 20 minutes before 6 o'clock and waiting to hear us. Thanks to them. We can't hear them now, but in some time we'll try and get them on audio if we need to. But I think there's been a lot of interest. I only sent it to a close group of people because the idea was to record this for the future. That while we record, we invite people who want to watch this and create a kind of prototype of unwebinars for the future. So thanks again for those who just came in now. Two quick things to keep in mind. It's called Zero Hour Online. For those of you who track Indian Parliament, Ravi Ray, a former speaker, brought in this whole concept of Zero Hour, which is the moment after the question hour ends at 12 noon, where parliamentarians could come and say anything they wanted to say that was important but not given a chance earlier. So we said this is our 0 hour at 6 p.m. on Monday evenings live, and then it's recorded and available on the Reputation Today YouTube channel in the future. Also, I work closely with a lot of corporate communications and PR professionals who felt a fatigue was setting in. They were tired of these webinars a dime a dozen. So we said we'll do something that makes them feel better than the normal webinars. They can see it live or see it later. And the idea is, I mentioned this earlier as well, we'll get various guests and various hosts in the future. I'll be the default host, but whenever we have an interesting host, we'll bring in 2 guests, and we'll never have a single Zero Hour online which has no diversity on it. We'll always have at least one woman or one man as much as possible. They could be all women in the future, but they will never be all men at all. If there's an all men panel, we'll cancel it. So that's our commitment and promise to diversity as a group, and we've done that in all our events in the past. So let's go straight into this conversation. We'll speak for about 40 minutes to each other, and then if there are questions that come in the Q&A box, we'll take some questions as long as they're not anonymous, and I'll place them before Rema and Antara. So Antara, will start with you because you came in first. Tell us more about your younger days. You grew up in Calcutta. You did a lot of interesting things. Tell us more about your martial arts belts and other things as well. We'll start with that little story and then move to Rema.
Sure. So I'm not sure how much of this will be interesting to everybody, but it was a tough childhood. Grew up in a standard middle class household, very fortunate to have had a roof over our head, excellent education, certainly no compromises were ever made there. But outside of school, my real education existed, and that consisted of learning everything from Sanskrit shlokas. I'm a qualified Pandit at the age of 13, to stitching, to crocheting, to harmonium, tabla. I trust me, I don't have a single note in my head that cannot kill you. I've been a competitive swimmer at state level. I've played every sport imaginable other than cycling. I was never taught to cycle, which is my secret, which is no longer a secret. I started Taekwondo, which is a Korean martial art, at the age of 5. I was one of India's first female black belts, and I got my first black belt at the age of 12, my second at the age of 14 or 15, I can't remember. But then I bust my knee training for the national games in 98, which was the first time that Taekwondo became a sport in the national games. And the reason for that was because the Seoul Olympics were in 2000. So if a sport becomes an Olympic sport, it automatically becomes something that you have in the national games. So because even though I was the reigning champion, I couldn't go to the national games as a competitor. I went as a referee because I'd already qualified as one. So I was also then one of the first female referees of the sport. And I wasn't taught this as a sport. Like now you go and you learn Taekwondo or karate or judo, and you're learning on soft mats in gymnasiums. Those days we learned in gang-infested suburbia with in badminton courts where people used to treat as thekas or dhabas afterwards. So we used to come back at 10 at night and take glass shards out of your feet at the age of 8 or 9. It wasn't fun. But it was certainly a learning experience, and stood to me, gave me a lot of confidence to be able to travel the world, live alone from the age of 18 in Ireland, where I went to study law. I've only used it twice as a physical self-defense form in my life, but I have used it more, and the way we were taught martial arts is more like religion. So it's about mental alertness, about risk management. And I've used it to craft a module called PACE, which is ageless, genderless. You'll be glad to hear because I know you're such a proponent of diversity, where we can create a common dialogue around personal safety. It's a very simple, like crossing the road, how you learn or how you learn to brush your teeth. Everybody learns the same, doesn't matter where in the world they are. It's a simple 4-step module as to how to live your life in such a way that you are constantly building good risk aversion habits and being safe, protecting yourself and the people and the places around you. So kind of like, that scenario where there's a fire in a transformer and everybody is standing and taking selfies with it. You be the person then that actually calls up the electricity department and says, guys, there's a problem. So it clicks that part of your brain into action, not just about sexual assault, etc. I've been very fortunate that it's worked. I've taught over 20,000 people now all over the country, from CEFOs to children to schools and churches. And it's something I just do as social impact, really, more than anything else. So yeah, early days were one of a lot of learning, and I've been very grateful I've been able to bring that to throughout my life, all of the things that I learned.
Right. Thanks for that introduction, Antra. We'll hear from Rema now some stories or some anecdotes from your younger days as a school kid. And when did this strike you that you want to be in the Indian Police Service or serve the nation, serve the government as a police officer?
Well, it was really, it's an incredible story, what Antra just shared. Um, Such rich experience, I must say, hats off to you. And I guess once all this is over, we should probably, take out some time and catch up, either in Hyderabad or in Gurgaon.
Or
Um,
Bangalore. She's in Bangalore, by the way. Antra's based in Bangalore,
oh, that's
and
great.
I think Suvitas has a physical presence in Hyderabad and Bangalore, but it's available virtually across the world. But yeah, so you can catch up anywhere. Gurgaon is most happening also.
I would love to, Rama, but I'd love to hear about you. Please
Yeah.
tell us, because being a police officer and looking and talking like you do is very unusual.
I'm taking that as a compliment, and yeah. So
A 100%.
thanks a lot. Well, I was born in this beautiful hill station called Munnar. It's in the Western Ghats in the state of Kerala. I was raised by my grandmother because I was born a twin. I have a twin sister. Both my parents were working for major part of my childhood. I had to stay with my maternal grandmother. Childhood was really beautiful because you grow up among a small community, and people who live in hill stations are very well knit. Everybody knows everybody. You know what's happening in the house next to you, and everybody's invited to the functions, good or bad. You share your joy, you share your sadness, and the resources are shared. So that was part of my growing up years. And back in those days, we didn't have a lot of transportation facilities. So most part of my primary and middle school education, we used to walk. So I remember, Munnar being the second, I guess it's the place which receives the second largest rainfall in the country. So for about 9 months, we have rains, like heavy rains. So I remember walking to school like 15 kilometers every day, and with my sister and a group of other friends. And most of the time, we used to carry the uniform in our school bags, because even if you wear a raincoat or carry an umbrella, you will get drenched. So you have to carry the uniform in your bags, and you go to the school. So it was a very different experience. And the tea estate administration has a very unique way of education, especially in the primary school, where we were taught, or rather we were prepared to be self-reliant. So I guess my lessons on self-reliance and being really resilient in the face of adversity kind of started quite early in my life when we were in school. I remember learning to cook when I was barely 7 years old, and all of us worked. All of us worked in the kitchen garden of the houses. All of us worked whenever we were asked to. And learning was, state being Kerala, education was given a lot of importance. So we had this really, and wellness. Like I was just listening to Antra, and I was really impressed to learn that wellness has always been part of what she did all through her education, and then through her career. So this was also part of my growing up years. And my grandmother was a great human being. She never went to school, but she had this amazing wisdom. And her father used to work for the British civil servants, because Munnar used to be the summer resort of the British civil servants back in those days. So she used to tell me so many stories about the civil servants, how their lives, and how they ran the administration in the hill station, and how they used to come during the summer months, and they used to go back during winters. So these were, I guess, my learnings about civil services started very early. I remember, telling my class teacher when I was in grade 2, when she asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just said I want to be a collector. I want to enter the civil services. And she asked me what that was, and I had no idea, because that's what my grandmother told me. So I always had this dream, back in my mind. And once I, entered college, my parents were not really, in favor of entering the civil services, because they had absolutely no idea, because there was nobody no civil servant in the family. So they had no knowledge about it. And somebody told them that she's a girl and, it's going to take a lot of time to prepare for the civil services. And, the job comes with a lot of challenges and she may not, get a proper, guy for marriage. And, she may not be able to have children and have a proper married life. So my parents kind of, discouraged me in the beginning. But then, after I completed my master's in computer science, I started working as a systems analyst for Taj Group. I was based out of Cochin. So at that time, I started preparing without informing my parents. And the journey started from there. Then somehow I made my way to Delhi, worked in Delhi as a sub-editor for a magazine, to support my preparation. And in 2008, I cleared the exam. So when I cleared the exam, in the civil services, you are allotted to the service as per your rank, your preference, and the number of vacancies. So I ended up in the Indian Police Service, and then I went to the National Police Academy in Hyderabad, and I became the topper of my batch. And until that point, I had absolutely no idea about sports and games, and I couldn't even ride a cycle. But after I joined the academy, I became the best athlete of the batch, and I started, I learned how to ride a bicycle. I started running. I became a marathoner, and life changed like completely. Yeah, that's in a nutshell. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating stories from both of you. I did not know these little final details of both your stories. I knew some of it. But tell us, let's come back from wherever you last left the story to 2020, March and April. What from your childhood, which was not easy, has helped you all manage these last 60 days? Because there are a lot of people concerned, worried about their own well-being, their mental well-being, their physical well-being in the current times. Tell us what in your childhood helped you do better in the last 60 days, both as person in a personal capacity and as professionals, one as a healthcare business leader, one as a police officer. Let's hear it from you both. Antara first.
So before I start and answer your question, Amit, because this is informal, I'm going to take the liberty of telling I've spent some time in Munnar, actually on my honeymoon, and you're right, it's one of the most beautiful places I ever visited, and very fond memories of it. But coming back to the pandemic, obviously something that neither us nor our our parents, for a few generations, nobody has seen anything like this. It's unprecedented, and for a lot of people, I don't think it's sank in really what it means to be in a pandemic, what the extent of the risk and the danger that's out there could potentially be. And we've been very fortunate in India. You can look at a lot of other examples, including the US. Being in healthcare, I think we knew a little earlier than most people that something was very, very wrong, and we would need to be prepared for it. I think from my childhood, one incident maybe that stands out will reflect in the way that I responded. And that was, again, unfortunately, I'm coming back to Taekwondo. I'm not that fit anymore, Rama. So, but I think my second Dan black belt exam was on a Sunday. It was supposed to be on a morning. We obviously had no facilities, so we had borrowed some stadium. But the Bengal sports minister was supposed to visit. Now, because the Bengal sports minister was supposed to visit, we had to wait for him before we started anything, which meant we ended up waiting 7 hours in that stadium, whatever 200 people were there. We kept staying active because we had an exam to give, but first we had to do a demo for the sports minister because the TV crew was going to come. And we were all very taught very early on that we have to promote Taekwondo. It was unknown to the country when I started off in 1985. And he came at about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, around 8:30 at night, right? And I had to do my demo, which was I had to break some tiles with my leg. And those days, again, we didn't have fancy tiles, especially for martial arts. We basically took those shingles off the roof, right? Those stone, whatever you call them. I have no idea what it's called. And I broke it. I did my little stunt and I walked off. And then I noticed down that I'm wet. And I look down and I have blood splotches wherever I'm walking. And the entire back of my right pant is wet. And I look down and a wedge of that tile is stuck in my right ankle, right? So my mom's sitting on the dais with the minister because she was part of this whole Taekwondo association. And I crawled to her with this wedge in my ankle and I go, Mom, like this has happened right now, And she hands me, this is honest to God, hands me a handkerchief and says, take it out, wrap it up, you have to give your exam in half an hour. And I had to take that veg out by myself, wrap it, wrap my handkerchief around it, and just go out and do it. And it's a 4-part exam, one of which is fighting. There were no girls, by the way, in Taekwondo. There were only boys, and most of them were at least 6-7 years elder to me. And they're not going to take it easy on you because they're injured, because they don't want to be beaten up by a girl in public, especially not on TV, right? So that was tough. But the lesson that I learned was, when you're in a crisis, you just do. You don't think so much. You just get out and do. You fix the issue. It's about action. It's not about so much, sitting and having an intellectual conversation, or you don't have the time for it. You just have to keep doing and keep achieving and keep making sure you communicate and get to that next level, because that's what's going to create that ripple effect. The first thing we did was, we made sure we knew what we were dealing with, what steps we had to do, what other healthcare industry players were doing, but we just kept doing. We started locking down our facilities, making sure our patients were taken care of. Initial days, we had some crazy stories. All our nurses got thrown out of the PG because, the PG that they were in was allegedly illegal. We didn't know about it. A couple of our staff got hit on the way to work by junior, guys who were trying to be authoritarian, didn't really know what to do, didn't bother checking them for ID. So, supply chain of everything from medicines to consumables got affected, because some of them are interstate, and things were just stopped for the first couple of days. And when you have patients who are on antibiotics of a certain very particular kind, or you can't stop taking care of them, their life doesn't pause. They're entirely dependent on you, and your staff are dependent on you. So we started pushing them. We took our entire skeletal staff, housed them within the facility, made sure that 24/7 we were monitoring every single thing. And we were fortunate enough that we had small facilities, 50-bed facilities, and everybody treats everybody like a family. We call it the Suvitas family. We don't call them patients. We call them residents, auntie, uncle, akka, amma, whatever. And so I really have to give huge commendation to the team that pulled together at that time, because I didn't have to ask. We needed police permission, somebody went and got it. We needed some food, somebody went and got it. Some people just went out and did what needed to be done to keep the place going, to keep our patients safe, to keep each other motivated, and really pulled together in an incredible way. And all I needed to do was make decisions and communicate them and free up the money and make sure that every decision was made on that priority basis, because nobody knew the next day whether suddenly there was going to be absolute chaos. And
so
I
leading
come
from the front,
Yeah.
and taking decisions was the two things that you used in this scenario from your learnings as a child, right?
Just doing
Doing.
more than taking time to sit back or allowing fear to show. You cannot allow fear to show. I'm a human being. I have small children. If I sat back and said, I'm going to go work from home because it's lockdown, right? What imagine would be the impact on my 220 employees and my 70 odd patients and their families? It's incredible. You cannot
Right.
afford,
Yeah, hold on to this. I'm going to come back to you in a moment or two, Antra, to talk about how this virtual thing kicked off and what you do with the virtual rehab that you're offering. I'll come back to you, but let's hear it from Rema first on what is it from your younger days as a child that you thought would help you, because this was like the word I was avoiding to use. There are 4 words I'm not going to use, the 2 C words, which you know what I'm referring to, the disease and the virus. And the P word that she used, I'm only using lockdown because I don't want this to be a talk on that, but just learnings and conversations for a better tomorrow. So my question to you, Rema, is what did you do in the last 60 days, both personally and professionally, that were learnings from your days as a younger person back in Munnar?
Well, if you look at the way the pandemic, unveiled in India, you will realize that 2 things were always at the forefront of all the discussions. One was about the resource constraints. People, all of a sudden, everybody was left thinking, I mean, what next? What's going to happen next? Kal kya hoga? And how long this is going to go. And the second thing was about this handling of a crisis. Yes, we have handled crisis in the past. We have had natural disasters. We have had, major incidents where we really had to, step up our efforts and make sure that people were taken care of. But this was something completely new. I don't think in the, we ever had this kind of experience in the history of this country. So people had no idea, and especially police officers. I remember having the first case in the second week of March, and we were asked to take care of the contact tracing, help the healthcare administration in establishing the quarantine facilities, and make sure that the lockdown was successful. And in a country like this, with such a huge population, it is not easy to implement lockdown. And it was March 22nd where the honorable prime minister announced the Janata curfew, and for about, I guess, 15 hours I spent with my team. I was moving from one police station to another police station. I was conducting multiple wireless set conferences, many telephone calls with my circle inspectors and sub inspectors, sometimes even the constable officers, telling them about what COVID is all about. So creating that awareness, telling them what kind of challenge we are looking at was so very important. So crisis communication. I guess I learned this word from Amit some time ago. So crisis communication was really, really important. So first you have to manage crisis communication with your team, and then you have to manage crisis communication with the community you are serving. When I was doing this crisis communication with the team, I realized that it's not going to be easy communicating the same to the community at large. It's going to be a huge task, and we had absolutely no idea how to do it. So I guess, if you look at how I have done policing in all the districts where I served, I have heavily depended on collaborative policing, taking the support of the community, citizen-centric approaches, using the village police officer system so that we always stayed connected with the community. So we didn't feel any kind of glitch in the beginning. So on March 22nd, which was my birthday also, I was really surprised because at 5 o'clock, I guess it was 5 o'clock, where the honorable prime minister asked us to clap and motivate the healthcare professionals and the police officers who are at the forefront, the frontline warriors. So we were at the junction, and I remember 10 of my team members were with me, and we started clapping, and they started clapping, and they started walking towards me, and they started singing happy birthday. I was so surprised and I was really taken aback. And I saw that, people, leaving out of their apartments and, houses, windows, and, clapping and just saying happy birthday. And I had no idea, who told them. And this was a very pleasant moment. But keeping that aside, the thing that I carried forward from my childhood to these last 60 days were these two things. One, how you manage in an atmosphere where resource constraint is a huge issue. And the second thing is, handling a crisis, particularly, crisis communication. So we took the help of, the traditional media, we took the help of social media, and, everybody else had to be home, but we couldn't afford to be home. I mean, even otherwise, the job of a police officer is that, most of the time you're outside, you are barely home. But this was unprecedented. We were never home. So I remember in the first 25 days, when we had the positive cases, one after another, when we started doing the contact tracing, taking them to the quarantine and then to the hospitals, I remember, we barely slept for 3 hours or 4 hours. So was my team. So if you are not with your team, if you're not communicating them what the task is what kind of task we have at hand, and how long this is going to go, that is really challenging. But I guess I kind of managed it. One, because I had a beautiful rapport with my team. Two, because we already had a great connect with the community. So there was no resistance. And one last point that I would like to add here, and I think this, I would like to take it from what Antra just mentioned about the social will of people. She just spoke about how, they needed a permission from the police officers and somebody would go and get it. They needed food and somebody would go and get it. The kind of, the spirit and enthusiasm people displayed, the social will of the people. So when we saw the social will of the people in the villages, we were really, we were surprised, and we were glad that, our job, our burden was kind of, reduced. because people, even though they didn't understand what COVID was all about and what a pandemic is and how long this is going to last, but they just listened to us. When the village police officer went to the village and told them that, you should not step out of home, they did not step out of their homes. Well, we did have a lot of difficulty in bringing in this kind of, discipline in urban areas, which is surprising because the educated lot were the ones who resisted the guidelines and, violated the guidelines the most. But on the other hand, the villages where, they self-isolated themselves, and the amount of social will displayed by them, I mean, still being displayed by them in these 2 months, it's really amazing. And that is the one lesson that we need to carry forward for the future. The social will of the people. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I have a question for Mukesh Kharbanda for both of you. Mukesh is a very young PR professional based in Chandigarh who runs a very interesting company. His question is on goals. This is Conversations for a Better Tomorrow. His question is on goals to both of you. Question is there any goal that you had and because of the current situation you have put that goal aside? And the second part is there a new goal you have created for yourself because of the situation we are in for the future? So let Antara take that first. The first is the goal that you had to put aside because of the situation, and second is a new goal that has emerged now for the future because of the situation.
Right. Thanks, Amit, and thanks, Mukesh, for the question. I think I'll speak purely as a professional. My one goal was, because what Civitas does is a pioneer in the country in terms of comprehensive physical rehab happening in a distinct facility. So taking care of like stroke, road traffic accident victims, etc., post hospitalization, and putting them back on their feet so that their disabilities are reduced. Those kind of cases that we see, what we do is unique. We are known for it. We are thought leaders globally in the way that we've done it for India. My goal before the pandemic was that we should geographically expand. So we should have these facilities all over India, because there was always such a demand, and we're still creating awareness on the quality of life aspect. Everybody knows quantity of life, but very few people know about quality of life and the impact that physical rehab can have. That completely on hold, because in order to do something like that, you need funds, you need investors. As it is healthcare services, nobody invests, right? You're in that situation where you have a few large players and they keep, shuttling between themselves, but there's not any investment in healthcare services, very, very rare. So that was completely put on pause. What we flipped it then was when we started, and coming back to Amit's earlier point with virtual rehab, is we took physical rehab global. So we no longer needed a facility. Now, this is not true of every case. There will be cases where you still need equipment and some other expert physically holding you through your recovery. But in most of the minor cases, physiotherapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, psychology, counseling, nutritional counseling, even geriatric fitness can be delivered in a virtual environment. So through phone and guided video sessions, if it is done by an expert who knows what they're doing. So we launched that. We had anyway planned to do that because we don't really do home health at all, but we wanted our own patients to have the continuity of care when they go home, but be supervised by the same team that had taken care of them for 40 days. So we had already experimented and piloted a couple of these, but we just accelerated it and said, right, you guys are not going to travel for a long time, the rest of the world, whoever it is, whether it's an elderly grandparent or it's somebody with paralysis or it's a housewife with back pain, you're not going to travel to a hospital in the near future. You're going to be so scared of being exposed to infection, number one. Number two, you never know when the lockdown is going to end or what stages are going to come. Number three, you don't know when the pandemic is going to recur. It might come in waves. So in the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to be shit scared about going to a healthcare facility unless you really have to. So are you going to stay with pain and make that paralysis potentially worse or have other issues, whether physiological or physical?
Right. So to sum it up,
so
I'm going to make your answers shorter now because we have little less time left. So goal is to open it out to the world using virtual for the future.
Yes, and we've done that. And so we paused the geographical expansion.
Got it. And Rima, in short sentences, what's your goal? Because we're getting a lot of questions now and I need to make time for everybody. What's the one goal you can't think of doing now? You have to put it aside. And what's the new goal you have created given what we're going through?
Well, I guess, we were really working a lot on this, people-centric policing approach, before the pandemic hit us so badly. And during during this process of policing the pandemic, we realized that that is one approach that is going to help you in any situation, not just a pandemic. So I guess my goal for the next maybe few months or the coming years is to gather this huge wealth of lessons and wisdoms we learned in these last few days, and probably document them and come up with a set of guidelines and prepare the force for the future. Because right now, if you look at how we handled the pandemic, we learned on the go. We were not ready. I'm sure a lot of my boys and even I have seen a lot of Hollywood movies like Contagion, and we never thought, and we always thought oh well, this is not going to happen to us, but yes, it did. So what if it's going to happen in the future? So right now, my goal is to collect, collate, and compile this huge amount of lessons that we learned and prepare a proper roadmap for the future, and preparing the force for that.
And what's the goal that you want to mark aside?
Interrupt, sorry, once, Amit, but I want to respond to just what Rama said for a second. You mentioned Contagion. When 9/11 happened, I was just before it happened, I caught a flight out of Chicago on that day. And when I reached Heathrow and I saw the videos of 9/11, I actually thought that was a movie. And I was wondering why every airport was playing the same movie, because I went from Chicago to Heathrow to Bangkok, and everywhere the same, video clip was playing. So it's quite, real life has become surreal a lot for all of us.
Interesting. And Rema, back to you. What is the one goal you won't be able to achieve now for some time at least, or you have to park it aside because of the situation? Is there one like that?
Well, I don't think I kind of thought about it. So, well, I guess the answer is
fine. I've brought in a guest to the panel right now who had a question, and I asked him to bring the question on. My goal was to see him as well. Oscar was my college school senior back in Mangalore 25 years ago. We lost complete touch except on Facebook 20 years ago. But 3 weeks ago, he got in touch with me again on Facebook and we connected on phone. So I thought I'll use this opportunity to see him on video. He has a question, I think, for Rema on policing. Oscar is in Dubai. He works with Emirates. He's a second generation Emirates employee, also on the front line. We can ask him a question on how flying is going to look like, but he'll ask Rema a question in the meanwhile. Oscar, over to you. Unmute. And
thanks, Amit. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Rema, this question is to you. I did hear what you said earlier based on community-based policing. Now, it is my opinion, maybe the opinion of many others, that one of the things we lack in India is the presence of a community-based police force. I understand this is an opinion, but I'm voicing it here. Now, to quote a former police officer, we were given the police system by the British, and they gave us the Irish constabulary rather than a London-based Scotland Yard. Do you agree with me in this matter? And if so, in your sphere of influence, what steps are you doing to overcome this and promote a more citizen and nation-based friendly force?
Well, thank you, Oscar. I completely agree with you. There's nothing that I cannot agree with. It's a historical fact, and if you look at the various police forces, particularly by the state governments in different parts of the country, they're making a lot of efforts to use technology to get in touch with the community, which is something new, innovative, and very novel in India. Yes, I completely agree with you that we inherited this system from the British. And unfortunately or fortunately, we are still sticking to the old laws. If you look at the Indian Penal Code or the Criminal Procedure Code, the Indian Evidence Act, more than 100 years old, and efforts are made. Efforts are made. I must say that a lot of efforts are made by the Ministry of Home Affairs and various state governments, because police is a state subject, and the state governments have to come up with efforts. A lot of such efforts are happening. If you take the case of my own state of Telangana has transformed tremendously in the last few years, especially after 2014. The way we handle women's safety, the way we handle cyber safety, the way we bring in that behavioral transformation among the forces. But yes, it's this, like you rightly said, we inherited something that happened over 100 years ago. And it certainly is a time-taking process, but yes, we are at it. And because of media, hyperactive media and social media, sometimes the unfortunate incidents, get all the media attention. And you know how human psychology works. You always, lean towards, something bad than something good. So if you look at the media space in India also, we barely get any space for the good work that is being done by the police officers. But, any, incident where, rights are being violated, or a cop is, behaving in an unruly manner, that gets a lot of media space. So, but yes, a lot of efforts are happening, and I'm sure I can, share all the work which were taken up by us and by different state governments, after the conference. I can share the details with you. That's all.
Thanks, Rema. Thanks, Oscar. I'll move you out of this panel for now, but we can stay back. I'm going to ask Antara a quick question before I open 2 more audience questions to Rema. So, Antara, tell us 2 things. One is, if a person sitting, say, in Punjab, in Batinda, where my colleague Roshan is sitting, wants to take the help of Suvitas Healthcare for a back pain they have, how does that work? Can you tell us in a minute the 3 or 4 steps that go into getting rehab for a back pain for somebody sitting in Batinda from your doctors anywhere in the country?
So it's very simple. You pick up the phone, you book an appointment. There's an initial consultation where the person understands what you need, and they therefore direct you to the right professional. Because if it's pain, you may need a pain management doctor. You may not need straight away physiotherapy. That session is booked. It's generally, we already know by the time the session is booked whether you prefer WhatsApp video or Zoom video or just a phone call. And that session occurs. Based on that physical audio video session, we then conduct further sessions to take you through. If you need emergency care, we are not the right place. So we also inform you about that. So that's basically how it works. And you are then,
and somebody
monitored.
needs to have a payment app on his or her phone, right? A Google Pay or a Paytm, or you also do net banking. And how does the payment work for the services?
All of the payment options are available. So you do not need to have any particular, we've kept it very, that's why we don't have our own app. We haven't stuck to one platform. We've kept it platform agnostic, payment agnostic. The idea is more about being able to serve anyone, anywhere in the world.
I hear you. The question I'm asking is, I know people who are in their 70s living alone who don't know how to use payment apps. They only have gone to the bank traditionally and paid for something like this, and they don't feel comfortable going to the bank and making a payment. So how does it work for such people? What are the options you have, just to understand that, for older people living alone who need support?
So actually, we would even talk them through the payment methodology. We have a full ops team that will do that. And we've done that in the past, where we actually show them how to make a bank transfer or even teach them how to download an app. But I just want to come back to the collaborative policing thing that Rama and Oscar were talking about, because I have an experience. I lived 15 years in Ireland, by the way. And when I went to Ireland in 1999, there were no brown people, right? I was an oddity. I was something that, a circus freak that the police commissioner actually took me from school to school in underprivileged areas to show what an Indian person could look like. Because when they did projects about Indians, they only had people on flying carpets and with snake charmers and on elephants. The first question I ever got asked in law school in Trinity College in Dublin was, did you go to school on an elephant? This is by my classmate in Trinity College. And I was stunned. I was like, why would I go to school on an elephant? I'll tell you the logic of an answer in some other forum. But this is the situation. So the idea of having the police going into classrooms and being a familiar face of authority, but also of support, is a great mechanism that I would strongly urge our own police force to do. And I would urge our education system to encourage and invite them, because I think our police force will always step in.
Right.
Yes, will always say yes.
Thanks. So talking of the police force, Mr. Narahari from Bangalore has a question for Rema. He says, given that a lot of movement will happen of all kinds of people, there could be migrants, there could be non-migrants who have gone for something, coming back to your district, what are the police doing, especially in your district because you run the police force there, to be able to manage the spread of a virus or the infection in the days to come? So what are the precautions being done? I know the world has read news on quarantine and isolation, but he's put his question there. I would have answered it to him already, saying people have to quarantine, but how are you planning to manage a probable rise in cases in the district? That's his question.
Okay, so we were one of the first districts in the state of Telangana to flatten the curve. We did have cases and many cases, but we managed to flatten the curve, as I mentioned in the past, with completely, with absolute community support. So we are going to continue that, because we cannot do this. We cannot manage this, large scale policing of a pandemic without the support of the community. number one. Number two, about the migrants issue. So this district is very unique in, when it comes to the migrants issue, because Mahbub Nagar is traditionally known as Palamuru. The name of the traditional name of this district is called Palamuru. And if you look at the Indian economy books, you will find a mention of Palamuru laborer. The people living in this district, because this was one of the most backward 36 districts in the country, they didn't find a job, they didn't have enough means, so they always out migrated to cities like Bombay, Pune, Bangalore, any major cities where the construction works happen, large scale constructions work happen. And this Palamuru laborers, this bunch of people, who can work in a construction site, they were always sought after because of the amount of quality they brought to the work. So over the past 60 years, thousands have migrated out of the district. And now, in the last 60 days, almost 10,000 such migrant workers who migrated many years ago to Bombay and Pune, they have come back. I'm talking about the crude figure of 10,000 in 45 days alone. And we are still expecting a large number to come back from these states. And the second issue is about the migrant workers who came from other states like Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, West Bengal, even Nagaland, Assam, Manipur, who came to this district to work in different irrigation projects and construction sites. And in the last 15 days alone, we have sent at least 600 such migrant workers back to their home states, because the state government, state of Telangana, was the first to come up with the Shramik trains. The special trains were organized, to facilitate they travel back to their home states. And from my district, we have sent hundreds back. Also, with the support of community and non-governmental organizations, we have arranged transportation for them. And the third thing that we did was, I have a national highway passing through my district, National Highway 44, which connects, Hyderabad and Bangalore. And we have established food banks on the national highway. We've been running these food banks since 65 days with the help of, social organizations, and sometimes my own constable officers have donated money from their own salary. Sometimes, my home guard officers and constables and sub inspectors, they pool in resources and they go to the places where these migrant workers were staying, to all the labor camps, and they were feeding them. They were supplying essential items to them. So we did go beyond the core mandate of our work during this pandemic to take care of this migrant, worker population. And yes, for us, the challenge is not over yet. It is a continuous process, because we are still expecting thousands to come back, and these thousands have to be screened and they have to be home quarantined, and we have to make sure that the community transmission doesn't start again. So I have a system called Community Watch, and wherein we encourage the neighbors, the sarpanch, the village headman of each villages, and the local public representatives to inform us whenever somebody comes from other state. So the moment we get this information, the multi-agency team, a team consisting of police officers, healthcare professionals, and the local revenue officials, they go there. And if the group is huge, for example, sometimes we had people coming from Dharavi, which is, emerging as one of the biggest hotspots in the country. And a group of 100, migrant workers came back from Dharavi. So we couldn't, encourage home quarantine for them. So we took a, momentous decision of, keeping them in a school. And they were also very supportive. They did not resist the decision of the administration. So it takes a lot of convincing. When the collector, district collector or the SP goes and talks to them, they go and talk to them and explaining, that, this is for your own good. They do support and they do agree to the decisions that we take. So that way we have handled this, issue of handling migrant workers in the last, 30 days. And this is, going to continue.
Thanks, Rema. We saw it on Instagram yesterday that your son turned 18 and you had an 18th birthday for your son at home. Happy birthday to him. My question, because I'm talking of older son, I know Antra has younger kids at home. My question to Antra is, and this is a question to all parents who are working in an office in these days and the kids are at home because schools are shut. How are you managing that part? How are you managing the balance of having to go to the Suvitas office on a day-to-day basis and have kids at home, which earlier would have been a little different because they would have gone to a school or wherever else? How do you manage to balance that bit, Antra?
So there are two parts to that question. Number one is, as a professional, I'm going to a hospital every single day. So I am exposed like anybody else to potentially many other dangers. And it's not just COVID. Every time you go to a hospital, you are exposed to something. In our country, we see 400,000 TB deaths a year, and we've never declared that a pandemic, right? Spitting is still something that we do without thinking about it, right? So immediately teaching them that I'm not to be touched till I have gone and showered and I've, changed my clothes, making sure my shoes are outside. So there's a process that I do at home that they're aware of, and they understand why mom is not to be hugged or kissed, till mom is fresh, and they understand that. So educating them is very important. Similar to community policing, it's family communication is collaboration is key. The second part is, I think personally making sure that having a supportive ecosystem is very important for everybody. So I'm very blessed with the kind of family and friends I have who will keep track of my children, who will keep calling, making sure they're engaged. So getting them a structure during the day really helps, because 11-year-old and a 6-year-old, and especially a 6-year-old who's like a hyperactive, want to be like, I don't know what to call it, Formula One racer on feet is a challenge, somebody who's never at home normally. But having a structure helps. Some days we just give up, to be honest. Some days you just give up and you allow yourself to be normal and fail at everything and fail at being a parent. And then you pick yourself up again and you go, right, we'll start from scratch the next morning. But you can't, you have that luxury being a parent and having a family. You can make mistakes at home. You can't make them in the hospital.
Interesting. So there was a question that somebody asked, Dave J, do you provide your service to retirement community? I said yes to everybody. I'm going to go back to Rema. There was a question that Rema got asked by somebody called Sarah Afnan. I don't know if you know her. She says, what was that one incident that made you sure that you wanted to enter civil services, even after receiving a lot of discouragement in your younger days? What was that one incident that led to it? That is her question.
Well, I can't remember any particular incident, but I guess, when you grow up in a place like Munnar, where you see a lot of misery on a daily basis. See, the thing about tourist places is that for the tourist, it's a heaven. But for the people who live there, in the absence of, resources and in the absence of proper systems like transportation and, proper education and healthcare facilities, life is not that easy. Life is very hard. It looks very beautiful on the outside, but if you start living in there, it is, a very, tough task. So I guess, that kind of gave me that, that spark to enter the civil services and be part of the administration where I can make at least, some meaningful difference. I know these words sound very cliched, but well, that was the reason behind me entering the civil services.
I think I resonate with what you're saying, Rama. It's about being the change, not talking about it or sitting in a living room with a glass of wine. It's about being the change and living it every day. I fully understand that. When I moved back to India, I did it for that reason. When I visited from Ireland, it was like a holiday. But when you live here, it's a very different system, completely.
Okay, hi both. I'm just going to quickly come in because Amit is facing a bit of a connectivity issue. So I'm just going to carry on with this. Just to quickly ask both of you. So we've been seeing that healthcare professionals have been also the victims of some kind of hatred from the community, from and also the migrant workers that have been returning, or rather people who have come from cities that are red zone areas and who've come back to their places. They have also been seen as victims at times of a lot of hatred from the community. So how do both of you manage that, as in you, Antara, with your professionals? How do you tell them to deal with people, and you, Rema, with with citizens who are returning back to their towns from a red zone or something that has been more infected, a city that has been more infected? How do you deal with that? Antara, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I mean, it's a very interesting question, because when you work in healthcare or sanitation or the police force, and you're very undervalued by society in general, till a pandemic hits and suddenly these guys are responsible for saving your life and everybody around you. and you gotta, suddenly you're clapping and beating dishes and lighting diyas and putting off your lights and nonsense like that. But actually what we require is a mindset shift, that the people who are going into your shit into the gutters, the people like Rama and her staff who are out there every single day putting their life at risk, going to infected areas deliberately to control the community transmission. People like my staff who are dealing with infection day in and day out, are people who deserve respect. And if there are mistakes made, they are mistakes which they are very cognizant of, and they deal with life and death decisions every single day. So I think that mindset shift is every single person's, excuse me, citizen responsibility to ensure that you make that decision, that I'm not just going to go out and make a shosha of this. I'm going to genuinely believe that these people deserve my respect, and I'm going to treat them like that. And if they make a mistake, I will wait and watch and see. Don't blindly follow us. Don't blindly follow healthcare professionals. Don't blindly follow any department. Question. But before you degrade, before you bring people down, know what they are dealing with every single day. And my clear communication to my staff and to my community is, you can't stop me going to work. If I don't go to work, your family might be in danger. You don't stop my staff. And I tell my staff the same thing. Be proud of what you do. What you're doing is saving the world, one patient at a time. And it works. You have to stand up for those things. Rama,
Right.
I don't know if you see it differently.
Well, I completely agree with what Antara has to say, because the respect starts from within. One, you need to be strong enough to send out that strong message that well, I know what I'm doing, and it's up to you whether you want to respect it or not, and I'm doing this for you. So if you look at how the police officers, faced the society, well, yes, there was a lot of anxiety among the families, because most of my boys, they were the ones who tracked down people and literally carried them to the quarantine center. This happened in the first phase, and I'm not really ashamed to admit that we didn't even have PPE kits back then, because the PPE kits and in the mask, everything came later. Because as I mentioned in the beginning, we learned on the go. We learned how to handle the pandemic on the go. So in the initial days, when we were taking people to quarantine, it was a huge task. And when the boys go back to their homes, the families were really worried. So I remember conducting a wireless set conference for the families, explaining to them in Telugu, the local language, how this is absolutely manageable. And we told them, you have to take a shower, please help them in washing their uniforms, and you have to support them. And we did something in the beginning itself, which kind of took care of the anxiety part. At this, we distributed personal safety kits to the police officers, and we also distributed personal safety kits to the families. And we purchased citrus fruits like orange, musambi, and watermelon, and we sent like 10 kgs of like a gift pack, like you do during Diwali. Send a gift pack of fruits to all the families, and they felt very important, and they felt that they are being cared for. So that really supported us. So that way, the boys did not feel a lot of trouble at home. But yes, healthcare professionals, we didn't have any major incidents in the district, but yes, we read in the media, and that's because of lack of awareness, the social stigma attached to the frontline workers dealing with COVID is because of lack of awareness. And I think institutions have a responsibility to create that kind of awareness.
Yeah, and I would just say that one of the things that really, I'm sure I speak for Rama, because having met her for 1 hour, and for any other woman or person that I know works in social impact, dude, we don't do it for the laurels. We don't do it for the awards. We don't do it for somebody saying good job, especially if you're a leader in business. We do it because we genuinely love humanity. We are there to serve. And it sounds like a beauty pageant answer, but it's not. If we didn't have kindness and love in our hearts, this would be a shit job to do.
Absolutely.
Right.
There's the only reward is coming home every day and knowing you saved somebody's life. And that will stand for more than what anybody else can say to us.
Right. I want to acknowledge some people who have come onto this call. I want to thank Shreya Krishnan, Pooja Nair, Mohit Chabra for coming onto this 1 hour Zoom catch up. There's a question from Rakesh Mishra. I don't think we have time for it, but Rakesh, I would urge you to reach out to them in some form, Instagram, to ask that question. If we have time, we'll take it. My last question before we end the show, which is the crux of this little show, is conversations for a better tomorrow. So the question is, what is it that you feel the world should do at large? You're feeling that the world should do for a better tomorrow, and what is it that you will do for a better tomorrow? We'll start with Antra. 2 quick answers. What should the world do to make things better in the future? Generally, forget the situation we are in, but in generally for a better tomorrow. And what would you do to make the world a better place for the future? And then the same question to you.
So it's a very idealistic answer. I would like the world to be kind to each other, and focus on building a kinder world. And what I will try and do is use the same logic for people that I strongly disagree with, people that I've learned to face a lot of hatred or negativity with, and I will try to forgive so that I can move towards a better understanding and a collaborative future.
So kindness and forgiveness, kindness for the world, which is not idealistic, it's really doable and possible. You can be kind without any expectation, and forgiveness, which is hard, but again, doable. Thanks. These are 2 important words which we'll remember at the end of this conversation. Rema, over to you for the same answer. Same question in different answer.
Well, I honestly, I have no idea why you named this webinar as 0 hour, but literally we are at the 0 hour. We are starting completely new. So we need growth lessons for a better tomorrow. And we always talk about it, and it's a very fancy term, but if you look deeply into it, you will realize that, we definitely need growth lessons in every aspect of our life. I'm not just talking about businesses or, institutions or the government or an individual. Growth lessons. And that's what I think we need to focus on. And the second thing has something to do with what Antra just mentioned about kindness. You can't be kind if you're not healed within. So I guess, this large scale healing, physically and spiritually is the need of the hour. You have time. The world has definitely slowed down. And I guess we need to, use this opportunity to heal from within. If you're not healed from within, you will never be able to heal somebody else. So.
Absolutely. I think it's an opportunity to restart, press the refresh button and do something amazing.
No, I think it's been a wonderful 1 hour. I think we could go on talking for a few more minutes or a few more hours, but I'm mindful and respectful of people's time. People blocked an hour for us. You blocked an hour for us. You both have to go back either this evening or tomorrow to the front line again and save the world one person at a time. But thank you both for what you are doing. And I'm sure there would be people who will want to reach out to you on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn. Please deal with that. And it was great to have this first episode of 0 Hour with the 2 of you sitting in 2 cities. I don't know what the temperatures in Bangalore and Hyderabad today are. In Gurgaon, where I am, it's 44 degrees today. We began the lockdown on March 22nd, 70 days ago, with a 30-degree temperature. Every 5 days, it's gone a degree higher, and now 14 degrees higher from the time we started. And things will only get in the higher 40s as we go along. But Narahari sir tells me that in Bangalore it's cooler at 32 degrees. That's why we envy Bangalore's weather and climate. Thank you for that update. So to all of you who came in the last 1 hour from different time zones, from different parts of India, thank you so much. We hope to do one like this every Monday and at 6 p.m. But for those who missed it out, the idea is we're recording this live. Some come and watch live. You can see it on the reputationtoday.in Twitter and YouTube channel in the future as well. Thank you, Rema. Thank you, Antra. I hope you found this meaningful and useful, and I certainly did. Appreciate your time, and thanks to my team, his Hemant and Shreya Doshi in Bombay, there's Amita Vadera, Gurbani, Anubhuti and Roshan in parts of North India, most of them in Gurgaon, one in Bathinda. Thanks for helping make this happen. I mean, it looks very easy, but there's a lot of work that goes into planning these things. Thank you. Thanks especially to Avignata, Moksh Juneja and team. They designed the creative, and my friend and classmate from college 20 years ago, Gio George in Dubai, he designed that little R-Glass 0 hour logo for this little creative we did. So thanks to all of them and everybody who joined in, especially the senior citizens from Mangalore, Dr. Derek Lobo and Patsy Lobo. Thanks so much for coming in much earlier to be on this session. Thank you, and all the best to everybody for the days ahead. I'm sure we have to just be safe, wear our masks, keep our physical distance, use sanitization and soap all the more, and make sure that we are there for each other, holding on to each other and making things better for the world at large. Thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you.
For those celebrating Eid.
Eid
Thanks,
Mubarak.
Rema. Thanks, Antra.